Today we're going to be discussing an in-depth analysis of the Star Wars saga, starting with Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This was an event, a day Star Wars fans have been dreaming of since they first saw Star Wars. Star Wars is back, Lucas is back, but he's also writing and directing each installment. This is insane! People came out in droves. There were lines after lines down the blocks. People were pre-buying tickets for 5 or 10 different showings. And for those of us who can say we lived it, we know the hype was real. And we'll never forget the feeling of not just being able to see another Star Wars movie in the theater and experiencing that, but the beginning of Darth Vader's arc. And then we saw it.
Part 1.
Fantastic.
Go see it as quick as you can.
I think the lightsaber battles were the greatest.
It was good, dude. It was really good.
So worth it.
So intense. I mean, my heart was beating. It's still beating now.
It was amazing. It was everything I thought it was going to be and more.
I must speak with the Jedi Council immediately. The situation has become much more complicated.
Now for some, it didn't hit home how bad this movie was until after a few weeks or months of seeing it. For others, like Simon and myself, it hit us while we were watching it in the theater.
Already I knew, it's like just the language of the crawl was wrong. It just didn't feel right.
It went from this glow up here in your heart, and then it descended.
And I just remember, thinking, oh my God, is it really this, is it actually this bad?
And then it dawned on me, after watching interviews of George Lucas and behind the scenes footage of the making of Episode 1, which we'll be getting into much more later, there's only one possible conclusion. Lucas went completely bonkers and no one tried to stop him. Now to be fair, there are some great ideas in the movie and some good scenes, but they are very far and few in between. The Duel of the Fates is what everybody remembers the most. The lightsaber fight between Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon Jinn. It is the most memorable scene of the movie. But out of a 2-hour and 16-minute movie, that's the only part that people really fondly remember. Now think back to Episode 4. There are countless scenes we remember and countless lines that we quote on a daily basis, even to this day. Are there any in Episode 1? Now I like Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn and his student-teacher relationship with Obi-Wan. Of course, Ewan McGregor is easily one of the best parts of the movie as Obi-Wan. He is perfect and exactly what we had always thought of Obi-Wan to be. I also really like Darth Maul, or what we saw from him anyways. I thought he was a good villain, but they hardly used him. And we've been a big fan of Natalie Portman ever since we saw her in Leon the Professional, and she did a fairly okay job with what she had to work with as Padme or Queen Amidala. And Ian McDiarmid came back to reprise his role as Palpatine, Darth Sidious, but as we all know him as the Emperor. And he was easily the most entertaining part of the film. But then we also got this.
You mean I get to come with you in your starship?
That's right, Lucas stuck in this blonde-headed, bowl-cut, annoying little twerp with the most annoying dialogue.
It wasn't my fault, really.
And then to top it off, he also created the most horrific character of all time. The thing that made all of our Star Wars nerds fans die a slow, dark death.
When in trouble, Gungans go to sacred place. Misa show you. Come on, Misa show you.
What were you thinking? Now, on one hand, I can see this. I can see that he wanted to create a cartoonish character for young kids. And he's even said that he made Episode 1 for kids. So I can understand his point of view of why he created a character like this. But he is the most annoying and most hated character in all of Star Wars. But what turned our hearts into a bleak puddle of goo was mainly the story and the structure of the story, or the lack thereof a story.
Part 2.
The way the story was told is just mind-boggling to me, and it felt like that from the very beginning. We open on some pilot asking permission to dock on some place that we're not even introduced to, and then two guys in dark cloaks enter a room. Then they meet these guys and they talk about a trade dispute, because that's what every Star Wars fan wanted, was to hear Jedis talk about trade disputes. I know I sure did. And the biggest problem with this opening is that we have no reference of any kind or any reason why we should care why the Jedi are there, because we're never clearly told. Instead, all we hear is a lot of political jargon that's not easy to understand. Besides that, what makes Jedis expert in trade laws anyways? I don't know. We don't know. So the Trade Federation sets up a blockade around Naboo, not allowing trade ships to come and get supplies, which causes some kind of crisis, I guess. Why would the Trade Federation want to blockade trade ships from coming in anyways? We don't know, because there is never any explanation. And so we stop caring. Why should we care if it's not explained to us? And that's another huge problem with an opening of a movie. If you don't explain what's happening or who the characters are or what's going on clearly, then the viewers just end up not caring about that scene. And they give up and instead just watch a screen full of characters doing nothing. And it's because Lucas, again, doesn't tell us. This is filmmaking 101. You have to establish what is happening to the storyline to hook the viewer and intrigue them into what's happening in the scene. Instead, Lucas opens the movie up with an awkward, boring political dialogue that drags on for 10 or 15 minutes. Now, in the original Star Wars, Episode 4 A New Hope, in the beginning, we know everything we need to know just by the visuals. We have a sense of how small and ill-equipped the rebels are compared to how massive and powerful the Empire is. Now, in filmmaking, visually, when you shoot something at a low angle, it gives a sense of dominance. This person or thing has power over the other. So just this shot alone says everything we need to know without saying one word. And we are completely intrigued. We are completely hooked into the story. Unlike this.
Captain.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, exciting stuff there. We have no sense of danger, no sense of power. All we get is spouting out political dialogue that isn't intriguing, plus the direction is so lazy. All we get is these flat camera angles that anybody can do. So this comparison of just the opening scene between Episode 1 and Episode 4 is an example of the overall style between the original trilogy and the prequels. And it's not a way you want to kick off a new trilogy, and it's definitely not a way you want to open up a movie.
Part 3.
Now, Lucas has said multiple times that he was inspired by the classic serials of the 30s and 40s. He envisioned a modern day telling of these classic tropes. Good versus evil. A simple man on a journey who becomes the hero. The rebel. The main villain. The wise old man. The damsel in distress. And they all go on some sort of epic quest. And Lucas did a great job with this in Episode 4 and with the original trilogy. And they were all relatable. The prequels, on the other hand, Lucas only seems to care about one thing, shoving as much CGI crap into a 2-hour movie as possible, that it becomes so dense and every single shot has so many different things going on at once that it becomes very distracting and it's impossible to root for the hero because you're not even sure who the hero is. Is it Qui-Gon Jinn? Is it Obi-Wan? Is it this little twerp?
I'm a person and my name is Anakin.
No on all counts, because when you think of a hero, it's somebody who is brave, comes to the rescue, who has noble qualities. Well, it can't be Anakin, he's too young and we already know he becomes the villain. It's not Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon because they really don't do a whole lot except find Anakin and try to train him and take him to the Jedi Temple. Who's the damsel in distress? It's not Padme or Queen Amidala. We can clearly see she can fight and leads the rebellion. Who's the villain? The movie is called The Phantom Menace, yet I have no idea who the Phantom Menace is. The story has no clear lead villain. Darth Maul isn't a lead villain, he's just a helper. We know Palpatine is the Emperor in secret, but what's his motivation? Tax disputes? The movie has no villain or a villain with clear motivation for what he's doing, or more importantly, why he's even a villain. It's like Lucas forgot what made Star Wars or any movie good and compelling. Episode 1 does absolutely neither of these things. Can anyone even explain to me or even remember what the plot is? I sure can't. Again, think back to Episode 4 A New Hope. If someone asks you to explain what that movie is about, it's easy to tell them. But if someone asks you to explain what Episode 1 is about, I'm sure somebody will say the plot is Anakin, but that's not really a plot. That's more of a character development. So there's no motivational story or plot or any kind of resemblance of a structured story in this movie. Again, going back to Episode 4 A New Hope, we can all relate to each individual character in some way and also the story. So it's as if Lucas was so preoccupied with all these heavy special CGI effects, he put the plot and the character development and the dialogue and the story all on the back burner and let it cook there. And worst of all, Lucas completely ignored and changed the mythology of Star Wars from the original trilogy to the prequels, and it makes no sense.
Part 4.
Obi-Wan Kenobi in Episode 4 New Hope tells Luke about his dad, giving him his lightsaber, and then he goes on and talks about what the Force is, how it surrounds us, how it's part of us. In Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, Yoda does the same thing and elaborates even more about what the Force is.
It's energy. Surrounds us,
penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together.
Episode 4, 5, and 6 has a very clear understanding of how the Force is and how it works. Yet in Episode 1, Qui-Gon Jinn clearly tells us that the midichlorians causes ones to have the Force. He even checks Anakin's blood count and says that it has an unusually high amount of midichlorians.
The reading is off the chart. Over 20,000.
Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high.
No Jedi has.
What is going on here? This makes no sense whatsoever. None. I don't know what to say. And all of us diehard Star Wars fans, our hearts completely sunk and we were completely dumbfounded and confused by this. There's a reason why none of the new movies ever mention or give a call back to the midichlorians. Because it's retarded! It makes no sense. And it completely goes against the Star Wars or Jedi mythology.
Part 5.
So we've talked about the beginning of the movie, how we should open up a movie and how it was done completely wrong. We've talked about the plot and the characters, how there's absolutely zero lack of any of that. And now I want to talk about the ending. The biggest mistakes for the ending of Episode 1 was that there are too many stories going on at once. Here, let me break it down for you. We have the Gundams fighting off the droid army on Naboo, while Queen Amidala and her men storm the palace. At the same time, Anakin and the Naboo pilots fight and attack the control ship. And at the same time, on top of that, the Jedi lightsaber fight with Darth Maul happens in the control room. Now you might say that's not so bad, but when you look at it compared to Episode 4, the ending was much simpler. Episode 4 A New Hope, you had the rebels stopping the Death Star before it blows up a planet. The plot of the movie has been building up to this grand climax of the ending, and we focus on one thing instead of 4 different things happening all at once, jumping around. If you have too many endings happening at once, it becomes overbearing, it becomes crowded, and the audience can easily lose track of what's happening. And again, back to filmmaking. This is not the way to end a film. And after the first initial screening of episode 1, Lucas also admitted he did too much at once.
It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
And then we get to the finale. Yoda and Obi-Wan are talking in the temple, and Yoda says he senses grave danger in training young Anakin. But instead of Obi-Wan showing any kind of concern over what Yoda just said and asking Yoda what he means by grave danger, Obi-Wan just says this.
Master Yoda, I gave Qui-Gon my word.
I don't know about you guys, but if someone came to me and said, I'm in grave danger, I want to know what he meant by that. Now you would think, as a group of Jedi Masters whose entire life is built on the Force, their feelings, their prophecies, would follow their own instincts and not allow Anakin to be trained as a Jedi because something bad is going to happen from it. So again, no clear plot or motivation. Absolutely nothing there. So as an audience, as a viewer of this movie, why should I care about these characters if you don't give me a reason to care about them?
Part 6.
The Phantom Menace is now regarded as a huge disappointment in the Star Wars saga. So whose fault was this? Well, in all honesty, it was everybody involved. The producers were at fault for not questioning Lucas on the questionable stuff in the film and pressing on him that he shouldn't be doing this. But in all, the main problem is with George Lucas. He did everything himself, instead of dictating parts of the film to others. Now this is a very crucial part in filmmaking, and I'll show you why here. When you look at all of Lucas's property, every movie is story by, characters by, executive produced by George Lucas, while the screenplay, written by and directed by, is by somebody else. And he didn't have or let more people around him who could really challenge his choices. And you can totally see this when you watch the behind the scenes videos. People around him look scared. They look afraid to tell Lucas no. Every time he steps into a room, everyone is quiet. Some of the crew look confused and dumbfounded by what Lucas is saying. It's obvious that Lucas wanted all control on the process and making of this movies. Now, while that's not a bad thing, and the director should have control over his project, as a director, you also have to take a step back and realize and humble yourself that making a movie is a collaborative project. A second screenwriter comes in to help focus on the story and the dialogue. He can make it better. Even the actors are great too, as they can give more insight on what their characters should say or behave. A producer can be the voice of reason to the director when things start to go off the rails. But none of this happened during the production of episode 1. The Phantom Menace had a lot of A-list actors, a fantastic writer and director, some great producers, a great studio behind it, and this was the result. This is what happened. This is what we have. It doesn't make sense. So the only conclusion is that Lucas fought and dominated over everyone to have control.
Part 7.
Now, to be fair, I do know that many people do love this movie, and that's fine. I'm happy you do. I just want to know, what is it about episode 1 that you guys like and appreciate from it? And let me know, guys, what is your ranking for the Star Wars films? So I had a lot of faith in George Lucas. Sure, this one wasn't great, but George Lucas will redeem himself, redeem us as Star Wars fans, progress Anakin's story into the dark side, and episode 2 is going to be fantastic. I mean, it's called The Clone Wars. How bad could it possibly be?